Right, EU nurses and recruitment. Let's talk about it because you will have seen it right through the news, but you may have also seen some pushback from some Brexiteers saying that we are not dependent on EU nurses because they are small in proportion, and also it's all caused by the English language test. And in fact, I've got a tweet from Daniel Hannan from a couple of days ago. The BBC keeps attributing the decline of EU nurses here to Brexit. No mention of the introduction of English language tests last year. Yeah, there's a reason for that, Daniel Hannan, because it's got nothing to do with EU nurses leaving. Because the EU nurses already here didn't have to do that language test. That is about new nurses coming in from the EEA. So, let's break this down. Firstly, let's talk about retention of nurses that we've got here. Secondly, let's talk about recruitment. With retention of nurses, the data show that there has been a 67% increase in the number of EU nurses leaving, when you haven't seen nearly anything like that increase from UK nurses or from nurses elsewhere in the world. And that is entirely attributable to Brexit. So that is the falling pound, making salaries elsewhere more attractive. That is uncertainty. That is a philosophical objection to the Brexit path. And that is the feeling of hostility around. Now let's talk about recruitment. That's where you get this 90% drop-off figure that has been widely touted through the press. And that is a combination, in some degree, of the Brexit vote, which happened in June 2016, and the introduction of the very strict English language test that came in July 2016. How do you disentangle those and say is it one or the other? Well, clearly it's going to be a degree of both, because if you talk to frontline people, both are factors. But now let's talk about how important this is overall, because some people say at 5.3% of the total nursing workforce, EU nurses aren't really that important. We're not that dependent on them as we are in the wider population or other sectors. Nope, got to correct this one. You need to rethink your understanding of dependence here. Our nursing population has grown from September 2013 to September 2016 by 19,000. How much has the EU nurse population in this country grown from that time? 21,000. So the growth that we've had in recent years in our nursing is attributable to the EU nurse population growing rapidly. It has stayed effectively level for UK nurses and effectively level for non-European nurses. So in recent years, we have been plugging gaps with EU nurses, and that has been rising rapidly. Their total numbers would have overtaken the non-EEA nurses in 2019, but we've just seen now a marked decline because of those two factors. Secondly, 5.3% is not your indicator of dependence. It could be that we would have 50% of our nurses being Spanish, but if we can replace them all with English nurses, then we're not dependent on Spanish nurses. But if we've got a situation whereby we've got 40,000 nursing vacancies in the country, then you are dependent and reliant on every single nurse that you've got and that you can keep. And that means your UK nurses, your nurses from elsewhere in the world, and your European nurses. And that's the fuller picture.